Welcome to the Breakneck Podcast with myself, Ian Sweeney, and my buddy Matt Pashensky. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Ian.
So we've got an interesting topic this week, as always. The general consensus is the cost of software is headed downwards, tending to zero potentially in the long run. And the question for today is, what the heck does that actually mean and how is that going to play out? Let's start out with I suppose it's the new space. It used to be called the no-code space. Now it's kind of the vibe coding space, and I'm referencing businesses like Replit and Lovable and Bolt, and there's a bunch of new players kind of in this, essentially a new category. And it has been an absolute rocket ship for these businesses. Most of them 2-3 years ago didn't exist, or if they did, they existed in different incarnations. So I'm going to give you a couple of numbers which are mind-blowing, really just to illustrate the point that the door is opening for low-cost software and the demand is huge. So here's a couple of examples. Bolt hit 20 million in ARR in their first 2 months. They've raised in the last 18 months 105 million. Lovable hit 100 million run rate in 8 months, just raised 200 million on a 1.8 billion valuation. And then Replit raised 250 mil on a 3 billion valuation. Their revenue roughly a year ago was 2.8 million. They're going to hit 150 million this year. And in the next 12 months are targeted to hit $1 billion. So these are absolutely phenomenal growth rates. And what are these products? Like, what are people actually using them for? Well, kind of the core users or the initial users, for the most part, are consumer-like in their needs. They're rolling in, they're signing up for an application. They're like, I want to build something. I wanted to do X. I wanted to do Y. I think some of them, particularly Replit, is shifting a little bit more towards enterprise now. But it really speaks to this demand. Maybe we go back to Jeffen's law again. Cheaper software means significantly increased demand, nonlinear demand for software. And I think we're seeing that. There was all this latent demand, and all of a sudden in the last 24 months, there was a way for us to build software, build product at particularly low cost. So I think there's a bunch of different questions we can ask about this.
Just structuring in my head, I think there's several things that are happening simultaneously when we say software is going to zero. One, the cost of production is obviously going to zero. But then the amount that you want to build or the complexity of the stuff you want to build is going up. And so, to build a website like a Lovable, that's great. I mean, it used to be, I at least had to pay like $10,000 to get a website really put together, right? Even if it was a simple one, kind of boilerplate. Used to be $1 million. I mean, it's just constantly trending towards zero. But now the expectations around the quality of design and things like that start to go up. So you have falling prices, but increasing expectations as a result. And so is there some kind of equilibrium? Well, we should spend at least $50,000 on the website. For any given size of business, it's going to be a different amount. Second, when we talk about price of software going to zero, is there an ability to keep differentiation? Is the differentiation ability, is the moat that you can build purely on software going to zero? That's a separate section. And then third, and this is something I would want to throw a bomb into the conversation, is there some software that is not going to be replaced by AI whatsoever, and in particular, security software? Because I'll go into that, but I think there's some software that's going to be very, very expensive for a very long time.
Let's kind of do a history of software just for a moment, at least my history of software, right? We started out with sort of mainframe, extremely expensive. And then at some point in time, we had boxed software. Some people probably listening today have never even experienced that. You used to be able to get a Home Depot and get the latest copy of Microsoft Word or Intuit QuickBooks. And that kind of democratized software a little bit, where smaller businesses, even consumers, could begin to purchase pretty high quality software. And then we got the next incarnation of that, which was SaaS. And the beauty of SaaS is it was kind of crowdfunded software. we could all chip in our $10 a month
You buy a
and get,
shitty thing, but hopefully it'll be good in 2 or 3
yeah, sort of,
years.
let's call it enterprise or business grade software that did a thing, but it was all, always a compromise even still. Hence, many of us with 10 tabs open with 10, different SaaS applications. So what's always been missing is software that meets my need. And I'm going to talk in the context of a business, right? You probably all have our own experience. Shout out to customer mine, Josh in San Diego. Really interesting business. They rent out baby equipment to traveling families. So very unique business with all these really interesting constraints. SaaS software is good, but he's trying to piece together 4 or 5 different pieces of software to do the things he needs. So the promise now of vibe coded AI generated software is a bespoke solution for your particular needs. And so I actually think when we talk about software, we're really talking about 2 different things now. We're talking about scale. You're talking about moats, for example. Moats are really only relevant when you're talking about scalable software that you want to sell to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
You then have tailored bespoke solutions for for Pact's need or Beppo's needs. And I don't know that they will ever necessarily meet. And so I think that the
Well,
Lovable Replit.
that's always been the case, right? Like, number one, I want to say two. I want to react to that in 2 ways.
Yeah.
Number one, most people, if they do have bespoke needs, are wrong, and they should just do it the standard way, right? Like, if oh no, I want to do my CRM like that. It's like, what enabled you to think about how CRM should be done and come up with this new way, right? Like, you're probably better off almost always using software, not because the software is right for you, but because the software embeds kind of a time-tested way of doing things. It is a vector for best practices and standardization.
Yeah, but it's just the average, right?
And
I mean,
it's
if
not
you
the
were,
average. It's like saying a freeway is the average of places people want to go. No, it's a highly paved, very safe relative to going over, like, I don't know, dirt roads or whatever. Like, the highway isn't the average of places people want to go. The highway is the way things go. And then actually cities build themselves around highways because, well, now there's this really nice highway. And that's exactly what's happened in the software.
yeah.
Is a CRM like the right way to do sales? I don't know, but once there's a CRM in place and once you've hired your team who knows how to use it and all of that stuff, and there's this whole ecosystem of, vendors who will specialize and customize if you have specialized data sources. Software is not built for people. People arrange themselves to take advantage of software just as much. And I don't think you can
Sure.
overlook that. So then, I think this is really germane to the point of, like, is software going to go to zero? Well, if you can somehow capture a defensible way of doing things where Salesforce is just the way of doing things and there's access to data via Salesforce, then, even if the ability to go build a new CRM goes to zero, Salesforce still has plenty of life because it's just the way of doing things, not the software.
Yeah, let me reflect reflect back a couple of those points. So SAP and Salesforce as 2 examples, large companies. SAP has almost exclusively built a business around customization, configuration of a base platform.
Mm-hmm,
So many, many very sophisticated businesses have taken the base SAP, and the understanding is you buy it and then you're going to configure it and write your own code for it and do all of this stuff. So those bespoke solutions have been available to the large multinational enterprises. Let's say Salesforce, that scale of business rolled into town, and pretty quickly they were like, yeah, we want to hang on to all these businesses, and it doesn't, out of the box doesn't work. So now I've got all these Salesforce consultants and so, but then at the, let's call it the SMB level, that level of customization never existed. And at the consumer level, it never existed either.
mm-hmm.
So I think what we're seeing is we're satisfying that demand. But I think the other shift probably that we're seeing is, yeah, Salesforce has it right now because we're also used to, or HubSpot, because we've conformed ourselves into HubSpot or whatever it may be. But the promise right here is that we don't have to do that anymore. That we potentially don't even, depending on what it is. And I think we're heading in the same direction in this conversation. If you start with something small, I just want a thing that takes this piece of information and puts it over there and gives me a chart. right? I have to do that myself right today. I'm going to use Replit to do that. Great. Fantastic. Are you going to sell that to anybody else? No. Is it going to scale enormously to multiple offices and locations in your business? No. It's all good. Do you need to be a master, a product manager, and awesome designer? No, you just need the small thing to be done. But once you start getting to something that needs to be business grade, that's going to start creating a bunch of challenges that are going to be fairly hard to solve.
Yes, and I always take the example of 3D printing as kind of like a mental model for like this extreme specialization and the demand for it. If you go look at like, 333, what was it? DDD was the one, 3D, right? It was DDD was the stock ticker. They were rolling up all these 3D printing companies and it was just going to the moon because everyone said, well, now we can do anything. Well, it turns out there's already a technology for doing anything, which is polymer injection, right? Like injection molding,
Yeah.
right? But the problem is to build an injection mold costs $10,000, right? So you can print anything you want for $5. But if you wanted to print 10,000 of them, you could do it for $1 each, roughly, maybe $2 each with an injection mold, right? And so you had all this experimentation, 3D printing, what's called additive manufacturing now. But the problem is if you found something that really worked, well, guess what you would do? You just go do you just print it out in an injection mold, right? It's a much more expensive startup, but then a longer tail speed up. And the same thing with software. It's like, oh, we can do anything now. Yes, but we shouldn't do most things should not be done, right? And as soon as we open up the ability to find this market with specialized software, somebody's going to sniff around and say, everyone's basically doing these things the same way. And so AI at the same time, and I think the same thing with 3D printing, 3D printing opened up a whole new range of types of things that could be built. There's so much experimentation, but they didn't benefit from it because all it is a front end for repeatability, right? Factories will eventually be built. And everyone's idea in the business world is not to remain an SMB. It is to open a factory at extremely high margin per product, per thing coming out. And 3D printing enabled finding the inputs to those factories, but the people who own the factories are the ones who built 99.9% of those things. Hopefully that analogy resonates.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
a
yeah, we can
fantastic.
go
Yeah.
find all these different purposes, but the real success is going and finding 10,000 companies who've all experimented, and we say, isn't this what you want? And they're going to benefit because you're never going to do as good a job, not because the software can't be built, because you don't know what should be built. That's the job of a product manager who still needs to work for a big software company, and they're going to be using AI here and there. But it's like we always come back to repeatability, and repeatability is about finding coherences in the way things should be done.
But that assumes there's two different people in this mix. You have your product manager at Pact looking for long-term revenue through scalable, repeatable, satisfying of demand, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a business analyst within the business who's trying to get something done. They're not trying to sell anything. They're not trying to write software. They're trying to solve a particular business problem. We've been in the meeting with both of those people where the product manager is saying, I can do 80 or 90% of this, but there's no way I'm doing that 10% because I've never heard anybody else ask for that. I am not doing that. And the analyst is sitting there going, I don't care whether you want to do it. I'm paying you $5 million a year to do this. So I think what we're seeing here is that business analyst who's really focused just on an individual business now has an outlet for or a way to satisfy their need, which is to go to a Replit. I pick Replit because they're doing more enterprise stuff, and to actually spin up the thing that they need very quickly. They have no intention ever of scaling that. They're not going to sell it to their competitor. Why would they do that? So I foresee there being it's sort of democratizing the Salesforce consultant or the SAP consultant down to a lower level.
The fundamental problem we're talking about is the software costs going to go to zero. Will you still be able to make money by building software and not just the do-it-all AI, super labs like OpenAI are going to be the ones who accrue everything. And one of the things that you can imagine is that people start to adopt new practices that they didn't have 4 or 5 years ago because of AI. And, I was listening to Palmer Luckey on the podcast. It was the Technology Brothers Podcast Network. It's the TBPN. So they had Palmer Luckey on today. And he was talking about, he was the guy who built or what was it called? The Oracle
Oculus.
Oculus. Thank you. But it turns out like he was just the guy who was building gaming communities since he was 15 years old. Like that's what he did. He was building forums where people talked about the games they wanted. And out of that, he realized, oh, people really want this VR headset. And so he did a Kickstarter or something equivalent, and then eventually sold that to Facebook for $2 billion. So that's product, baby. There's this new medium of the internet. People are building chat rooms, and then he is able to tap into demand that wasn't there. That's what happens with A&Rs at music companies, going out to little concerts and seeing what the kids are into these days, finding those little inputs. Fashion companies do it. They go out to places where fashionable young people are. Like there is this process of discovery. And my point is, no one should be building the same software over and over and over again with AI. It should be cached at minimum by the AI, right? Like if we know
Yeah.
this is a thing that gets done 50,000 times a day, those 50,000 people might have never been able to connect together before, but now they can be aggregated, studied, and then build that 90% solution, but 100% solution out of that. The shape of the world is going to change. The people who can be connected together, the people who can adopt new practices and who can find opportunities for these things. But it's like, I believe it's the same thing it's ever been, because why would we be burning tokens to build the same software over and over again for people who don't know what they need, right? Like they might be able to get pretty close, but they're going to have, I watch people do this with project management and various things. It's like, oh, this is how I'm doing that. I'm like, that's bad for this reason. And you wouldn't know that until you did it. And
Yeah.
software is just that over and over again. You got to just
Yeah.
handle every edge case. And there's no way a human prompting an AI is going to discover those edge cases on their own. It's not the long-term solution.
Well, unfortunately, Matt, this is going to disappoint you, but I'm going to agree with you on
Okay.
this.
That's what I
But
want. This is a contest. I have no
yes, yeah, no, you have not one. Let me explain why.
Oh, okay, sure.
So I think what we're doing is we're creating a new category of software. So let me put that statement aside for 1 second and tell you why I agree with you. We might have said it here on one of the episodes in the early days that we think SaaS is dead. Um, I no longer believe that. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to redefine SaaS slightly. So what's apparent to me is vertical AI for right now is the way to go. The real solutions are solutions that are AI native, but they use deterministic software in the right place and they use AI in the right place. And the art is in combining them away to deliver an outcome that we need. That is still, I don't foresee a world for the short term anywhere where we don't package that just like a SaaS app, right? Maybe the pricing is different, whatever. But fundamentally, it's going to be a structured product where there's a user model and you expect particular outcomes and you kind of understand as a human how it works and it's going to deliver an output. So SaaS will remain. And if SaaS remains, as you said, there's no point in everybody building the same SaaS.
There's no doubt that things are going to get sold on a seat basis or license basis as in the past. What the problem is that used to be a surefire way to build gigantic companies. And I think two things have happened. One, every possible permutation of SaaS product has been built over the last 10 years, as far as I can tell, right? And second is agents are coming, which are going to leverage those SaaS platforms that do two things: do the job without needing a seat, where a seat doesn't even make sense anymore. They're going to find other economic modes, right? Like if I can service two companies in a way that I can detect that they should be selling to each other, right? Because I have this agent that's operating on 20 different systems. The best way to make, and I challenge the reader or the listener to go do this math themselves. If you can take 1% of the average revenue between two companies, so much more money to be made than selling them any kind of seats. But they'll thank you for it because you just probably, the margins from one side is 60%, the value, the ROI for the other side is 4x, and you're only taking a 1% fee. Like there are so many of those opportunities that, beyond the fact that every SaaS permutation has been played, we now are opening up like these wild new opportunities to make money. So capital's not going to just try to force itself into SaaS. And so the idea of starting a SaaS company is dead. Making SaaS your main mode of making money is also, I think, run its course, because there's already a company that's doing it that way. And by the way, there's such a better way to do it now if you can have an agent, not just operating on with a person entering data into it, but going exploring and doing all these things. Like, people need to understand that that's just going to be far more lucrative, and you should be focusing your efforts there.
So I don't know if I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. So there's a couple of steps to this. SaaS as it exists today, a 3 or 4-year-old SaaS product probably doesn't make sense anymore, because AI is allowing you to re-architect and focus much more on an outcome. So we talked a bunch about this before, but the job of that piece of software is going to be different because it's not constrained in the ways that it used to be constrained. But I still think there's a new incarnation of, it won't be I don't think it'll be CRM anymore. It'll be a different slice, something else to do with sales and maybe integrated with what marketing and whatever else. But I still do think that there is going to be the next incarnation of SaaS products. And I do think there's going to be a UI. There has to be a UI. And I'll tell you why, because there has to be some level of structured representation for the user to understand that information. It might be more lightweight, right? It might be more presentation rather than output rather than input. So I put that aside. That's worth I think it's a whole episode on its own, by the way. Maybe we come back to that. I do agree with you. There's a lot of space, though, for agents then to play in between those. And I think there's a third space, which is great. I like my SaaS application, and maybe they're agents, actually. I don't know. But it's the Replit space. It's the proprietary, tailored to my needs version of that code, delivering that outcome that I particularly want.
Okay, we clearly need
unique
to
to my
disagree
business.
again. So let me
Okay,
say,
let's do
I
it.
want to take the opposite view, right? You talked
Okay.
about like the ultra specialized no code, where it can really, it's an AI powered tool that's sold maybe in a type of product or SaaS way, and it's helping you specialize. I would say something that I'm seeing emerging is the direct opposite, and that gets back to my point about security. Is that I've seen a lot more companies building with functional code, right? Which, functional programming, like, it just has it's a lot harder to do, really dumb things with memory. So it's more stable, it's more secure. I'm not like a coding expert, but that's my
What do you
understanding.
mean when you say functional code?
Yeah, like things like Rust, where you are, building a Lambda that takes data, processes it in something, and then at the end of it, it no longer exists. There's no memory leaks or anything like that. So,
Yeah.
for instance, the military has been pushing a lot of companies to translate their codes into functional because of that reason. It's harder to hack. It's harder to do, grab some sector of memory and overwrite things. There's just advantages to it.
Yeah.
It's not foolproof. But that's just a trend that's happening. People moving towards more secure systems, right? As you have AI that can do things, like you think about the normal hack. Imagine an agent that got a hold of your computer and could test 100 different permutations that are all kind of embedded in it. So you have a much worse problem with impersonating people, all this stuff. So there's going to be a trend towards, I think, very secure platforms, or maybe outside of security, very trustworthy platforms, right? So if you say, oh, I'm going to build my own CRM, well, why wouldn't you have like a base layer of CRM that has different economics, but is very, very reliable? And I think we're going to go from system of record to reliable backbone that people can then do their little jazz on top of, right? You have a beat, this standard, it's very reliable, very well architected, highly secure, all the things you'd want. But now, instead of having the AI go out and build from scratch, it goes and accesses this very reliable substrate. So it only is doing the last 10% in AI, not the first 90% that we always knew we could do very well with software. And so I think you're going to see that more and more. I think that's maybe how Salesforce imagines themselves. Like, I have Agentforce, but you have all of this great Salesforce data. And it's kind of like, I've seen my Salesforce implementations over the years. I don't think that's great data.
Yeah.
But that rough model that you're going to have a base of very trustworthy ways of doing things and trustworthy data, high security systems, and then only doing that last little bit with AI.
Yeah, I know, I agree, and that's the same design pattern we see at Salesforce and Workday and SAP, which is solid, rock solid basis foundation, and then you get to do some stuff on top of it. I see Replits fitting into that world. being that kind of 10% layer on the top that gets you that sweet, nice customization. And then I buy the other stuff for cheap because I'm the same as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I love the 3D printing comparison. Because the challenge is not only does 3D printing not scale particularly well, it doesn't have the same mechanical properties, right? And so when you think about customizing Replit software, you're really giving a hobbyist the ability to manifest a piece of software that does a thing, but a bunch of these people have never designed something like that before. They're not thinking about any level of scalability or security. And yeah, you hope the base platform doesn't or takes control and doesn't allow them to do too much. But that's not necessarily the world that we live in today. So going back to those crazy numbers we started with, I'm beginning to
I can't
think there's
handle
going to be a
three
bump in the
three
road.
million to 150 million. That's too much. Don't let anybody know about that. That's too high a bar. We can't talk about it.
I don't even know how you scale internally a business to do that, but that's an aside.
Well, there's a lot of companies that are going out and mechanical turking and forward deployed engineers and all this stuff. But yeah, so who knows what those deals break down to? I've heard I've seen some high flying companies and they're like, yeah, this is what we're getting that company to do. I'm like, that is somewhat related to the top line. So it's I think there's going to be a lot of, and then there's just people straight up lying about their numbers. So who knows?
Yeah.
It's a bit bubbly at the moment, but I'm sure a few of these are going to be real. I mean, I know I use OpenAI like every single day, like 10 times a
Yeah.
day, and I'm paying for it. So it's like there are these real use cases out there, but I just cannot allow the community at large to expect to go 50x per year. That's not
Yeah.
reasonable.
So I mean, then surely that growth rate will slow down, but I think they've got this in order to have a really scalable business, they've got to jump from consumer revenue. And I'm not talking about OpenAI and those guys. I'm really talking about Lovable, Replit, those guys,
Mhm.
where it's, hobbyists at the weekend setting themselves up stuff that does X, Y, or Z to real, at least medium-sized business and enterprise revenue.
Mhm.
So I think they're headed in the direction some level of standardization is going to be required, and they're going to have to really be significantly better than, Zapier and all of the existing kind of stuff that is out there. They're going to have to be at least an order of magnitude cheaper,
Yeah,
yet deliver the same
if I
level of
was running a
security.
company like that, I'm sure they're very happy with their growth and they have an AI story and there's VCs in their ear telling them
Yeah.
exactly what to do. I would just go out and do like a big deal with Accenture because it's like you're getting a whole bunch of top of funnel and you're building this real simple. And again, I use Bolt for free, so I don't know how they're making so much money, but you have people come in and then we upsell them into, I guess the hosting and stuff like that, but just keep upselling them forever. I think there's a whole world of services and building companies that if you do get people in the door faster, it's a new lead generation. Because in the long run, how hard is it going to be for Squarespace or whoever owns that now to offer its own Lovable? And then that's the whole market, right? Like you got to go build some other capability.
It does make me think that your Accentures and more so than your McKinseys and your Accentures of the world, if they can grab a hold of this in an efficient way, they have the demand and their cost side could go down significantly and they get to play the AI. Hey, we're all AI. I mean, it might really just blow their business up in a positive way.
Yeah, on the other hand, some of these consulting companies are in extreme duress right now.
Yeah.
And my literal bet is that there'll be a whole new layer of services deployment that's not the Salesforce model, it's not the Accenture model, it's not the Wipro model. It'll be something much more dynamic, mediated by AI. But
Yeah.
that's my own book.
All right. Let's land it there. Anything interesting come across your desk this week?
Well, we have had a long running discussion about the OpenAI browser whenever it would come.
Mm,
And they released a in chat kind of experience. And then today they released something called Atlas, which
yeah.
is did you play with this yet?
I have not seen it yet. Just saw the headline.
I don't know. I haven't figured out the use case yet. because it just looked like ChatGPT, and then I chatted with it a whole bunch, and then eventually took me to a website, but um, I don't get it yet. So after 5 minutes, don't get it. But that's something we need to talk about more because I think the developer demo they had where you use Zillow and then you could interact with Zillow via chat and then also go back and forth between various websites and have websites pulled into the conversation based on context. That's extremely compelling to me. So I'm assuming this releasing this browser is just kind of part of their move fast, get out the product, and they'll iterate until it's good. But it
Yeah.
shows where they're thinking, which is they're going to own Chrome, and we have had that whole line with Ricky and everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The other one that I think is converging a little bit at the same time and is probably necessary is the agentic commerce stuff. So the ability for the agents in the right way at the right time to line up a purchase or even make a purchase on your
yep.
behalf. So yeah, and there was a mention of the Comet browser from Perplexity as well. So where it sounds like we're a matter of weeks away from some really, really interesting stuff on that front, which will be exciting.
Yeah, it's and overall I think it's good for Google. Obviously, all of this is detracting from Google, but I also think that Google has been operating in this kind of like threat of antitrust for a very long time now. And the fact that there's people actively attacking Google is of course like bad for Google in some sense, but also great for Google because now they can just they beat the Chrome lawsuit precisely because people knew this was coming. And so Chrome is remaining part of their house, and now they're operating, and their goal is to compete versus don't break too many rules and get caught in an antitrust lawsuit. So um, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, when he made the big like $10 billion investment in OpenAI, said, we're going to make Google dance. And I think Google's dancing just great, and Google's probably enjoying themselves more as a dancer in terms of the share price. Who knows? There might be some people sitting on the roof in a lawn chair who have to get back to work. They might not be as happy, but I think overall it's a much more dynamic company post OpenAI. So it looks like it's just an overall great thing for everybody, in my opinion.
Well, my hope is, and I complain about this a lot, that the chat interface is insufficient for AI.
It's all about voice chat.
So
Voice chat
yeah,
is coming. Typing sucks. I like typing when I'm like writing a document for myself. I'm
yeah,
like, it's the right level of input. When I'm telling somebody to do something for me, I don't want to type. I want to talk, and that's
yeah.
coming. So I think a browser where I talk to it, and then you have the Facebook little uh, pop up
Oh, the
when it's
glasses?
necessary. I think, yeah,
Yeah,
voice is finally getting good enough. I think we're going to get to the point where on device voice is good enough. And my personal experience with voice is that it is much more compelling if I can just talk and ramble off all the stuff I'm
yeah,
thinking, because that's what AI is all about, is giving you this big prompt. And the better your prompt is, so having a back and forth where it can help refine the prompt, which is exactly what this Atlas browser does, which is like, I don't want to talk. I want it to just talk in my ear. Matt, what do you mean? Do you want two people on that flight to New York? Yes, two people. And when's the round trip? Oh yeah, it's a round trip. Come back like Thursday. Okay. It's like I want that to kind of be
yeah,
prompting me in the way that I would have an assistant sitting next to me. I don't want to like look at the browser. Oh, it has another question for me. Type. It's just bad, and it's going to go away very soon, and it's going to be multimodal, like you talked about.
yeah, yeah. And hopefully, I can see real time video in the next 12 months. Real time generated video,
Real time
probably
generated
short
video, but I
form.
think the unlock is just your AirPod
Yeah,
or your Facebook glasses or whatever in your ear, multimodal. Because like as we talked about, I think that episode with Joe is fantastic. You don't want to read a recipe. That's
yeah,
insane. Where I was listening to a podcast this morning on my way in, where they had a bunch of figures, and the guy had to read the figures over again because like no one can listen to a podcast the
yeah,
first time and remember the figures. They had to read them again. There's just all of these things that make sense visually, but audio and back and forth conversation is the input method of the future, and I'm pretty convinced of that.
there you go. I agree with you. All right, well, let's land it there. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Ian.